and I'm sure other people are going to join in. So I apologize up front if I have to repeat myself for some reason, for any reason, just to make, people understand a little bit of what's going on if they are late. So welcome, and today we're going to talk about the 3 hidden keys to overcome challenging times. And oh my God, is this a challenging time or what? First of all, I would like to welcome you all. Thank you for taking your time to be here. And I hope after these minutes, we're going to be about 30 to 40 minutes of presentation, and then we'll open up for questions. So I hope this time is valuable for you. And also, I will invite you to participate a lot. There are going to be many moments to participate. So I would also like to ask you, if possible, to turn off distractions. Fatima can't hear.
Sorry, it's unstable. Okay, but
Okay, good. I can see some of you, not all of you. I can see some of you. So please take this time to focus on yourself. What I'm going to bring to the table here are some tools that have been tried and tested with my clients and many other people. So take the time to focus on you for this more or less an hour that we're going to be together. So eliminate or at least minimize distractions so you can be fully present here. This is your time. And you can participate using the chat box. Is everyone familiar with the chat box? If yes, please type yes on the chat box. Okay. Excellent. Fantastic. So everyone knows how to use the chat box. So also, if you don't have pen and paper with you, please very quickly go get it, because you're going to do a small exercise at the end and you're going to need it. So I will give you 1 or 2 minutes to go and get pen and paper. And it's important that it's pen and paper and not your computer, because it does make a difference when we're writing from our own handwriting and when we're typing. And for this exercise, it's important for you guys to use your own handwriting. So type yes if you already have pen and paper, please. Excellent. So you came prepared. That's great. So using the chat box again, I will invite you to answer if you're an expat or a foreigner or an immigrant or an outsider. You can use whatever term you like. There's a lot of controversy among these terms. So if you are someone who was living in another country and living in one country and now lives in another country, which is probably not your birth country, type yes. Or I am an expat, or I am a foreigner, I am an immigrant, or however you identify yourself. Excellent. So we have foreigner. I was an expat. Okay, great. Expat living in Portugal since the year 2000. Okay, so for 20 years you've been here and you still consider yourself an expat.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, that's great. Well, let me see. We have more here. Expat. Excellent, guys. Thank you so much. So why is that important? Because a lot of what I'm bringing here has to do, and I'm going to make a parallel with how we function in a different and foreign situation. That's why I asked that question. And finally, I'm going to ask you, before we get into the content of it, how are you feeling today? One word is enough. You don't have to write an essay, but how are you today? Just let's check in. Good, good. Okay, busy. Tired and busy. Okay, finally someone's honest. So this is weird times, right? And I don't know about you guys, but I've been quite unstable in the sense that there's some moments that I feel good. There are other moments where I feel anxious. And if you're feeling anxious about this whole situation, this pandemic, and if you're feeling it's hard to focus, which for me happens a lot, and if you're having a hard time coping, who's having one, two, or all of those? Just write in a chat box. Do you feel any of this? Or have you felt in the last months since this started? Have you felt anxious? One, anxious, finding it hard to focus. So I go between them all. Yeah, so do I. So do I. So if you identify, we have one more, hard to focus. Yeah, I totally get it. You're in the right place. That's the good news. Because I'm going to give tools so you can deal with these feelings and you can start tackling them. So at the end of this webinar, you will understand the phases of a transition. What happens when we go through a transition in life? You're going to learn how to focus your energy on what really matters to you. Not what matters to other people, but what matters to you. And you're going to learn to be more positive and productive no matter what life throws your way. These tools you can use at any time of your life, when things are small challenges, medium challenges, or huge challenges. So hopefully this is something that you will take forever and use whenever you feel like it's kind of hard to move forward. So are you ready? Before I begin, I'm not going to talk too much about myself, but I kind of want to explain why I'm here and who I am. So this little person here on the picture is me when I was about 6 or 7 years old. I was living in the United States, in Connecticut, and I've been an expat for my life, for pretty much, well, for my whole life. I moved the first time when I was 1 year old, and I haven't stopped since. So I'm what is called a third cultural kid, although I'm not a kid anymore. And I've been through transitions I've been through my life transitions coupled with cultural transitions. I have been in cultural transition as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult, as a not so young adult, as a professional, as a wife, as a mother, you name it. So what happens is that before I worked with what I work now as an expat coach, I used to work in corporations, and I lived in many different cities in more than 5 countries. And many times I was very successful in my transitions, and many other times I was extremely unsuccessful. So what happened was, about 4 or 5 years ago, I decided to understand what the heck happens when we transition, and why do sometimes we are successful and why we're not. Because I'm the same person, so we can't all attribute that to personality, right? So I stopped my corporate career, I quit my corporate job, and I went back to school. I got a master's in intercultural psychology and a coaching certification. And in addition to helping myself understand these processes, I started to help other people. I started to help other people understand how to deal better with cultural transitions and how to navigate better through these changes. So that's why I'm here. So I promised 3 keys, right? So let's get to the first hidden key. The first hidden key that will help you through these challenging times is one thing that has to do with naming things. Have you ever heard of the term culture shock? Let's see. Yes. Yes. Excellent. So everyone has heard the term culture shock. And one thing that I learned in many situations is that we can only deal with things that we know how to name, right? We have to understand the issue to tackle it. So when I looked at cultural shock in the dictionary, I'm pretty old school, so I still look at the dictionary. And look what I found. Cultural shock is the feeling of disorientation experienced by someone who is suddenly subjected to an unfamiliar culture, way of life, or set of attitudes. So if what we're going through in this pandemic is not cultural shock, oh my God, I don't know what is. Because I'm feeling disoriented and I'm experiencing something that is suddenly unfamiliar culture, way of life, and set of attitudes. I can't leave the house. Or whenever I have groceries, first of all, I don't go to the supermarket anymore. I have groceries delivered. And when I do have them delivered, I have to clean them, wipe them down. That's completely unfamiliar for me. I don't know about you guys, but for me, that's completely a new set of attitudes I was not prepared for. So what we're going through is cultural shock. And once we can name it, we can deal with it. And guys, one thing I know about is cultural shock. This I can tell you, I know about cultural shock. So what are the symptoms of cultural shock? Let's understand what happens when people are feeling cultural shock. Feeling of helplessness. I've been feeling quite helpless sometimes when I look at the numbers and you just don't know what to do because this is so unknown. I feel homesick in the sense that I really miss my life before this. I want to go out. I want to go to restaurants. I feel homesick in the sense that that was what I knew and that was something that I really miss. I don't know about you guys, but I do miss going out and hugging people and interacting. Fits of anger over delays and other minor frustrations. Okay, the other day, I dropped a jar of pickles. And you know what happened? I started sobbing. Not because of the pickles, obviously, but because there's just an overload of emotions that suddenly little things become very big frustrations and reason for us to unload certain feelings. And this happens when we're in a new culture, and it's happening to us now. Delay or refusal to learn the language of the country. Okay, so this is related to cultural shock in the sense of moving to another country. Sometimes people experience a kind of resistance to integrating and to learning the new language. For me, I hate wearing masks. That's our new language right now. That's the way we have to deal with it. I hate it. I can't breathe. I get suffocated. So that is my way of my symptom in cultural shock of this new situation. And the fear of being cheated or robbed. So when we're in a new culture, because we don't understand the language, we can be fearful of, for example, signing a lease, of talking to people and being cheated. And what happens is that in this new situation, for example, the other day I had to buy furniture online, something that I had never done before. I was used to going to a store and, you know, checking it out and feeling it, which was not an option. So I had to buy it online, and I was afraid of being cheated or robbed because I was paying for something, kind of big amount of money, and you know, trusting that the company would deliver. So I went online and asked people and went to the forums, but I had that fear of being cheated or robbed. How many of you guys have felt any of these symptoms in a different cultural situation or right now in this, our specific cultural shock in the pandemic? Have you felt any of these symptoms? You can use the chat box. You can say which symptom it is, or you can just no one? Minor frustration, yes. So what happens with the cultural shock is that it's part of a process. So this is the typical curve of cultural adjustment. And we have feelings here that are positive or negative, and we have time. So typically when we go to a new country, a new culture, we have the honeymoon phase, which is the part of the novelty. Then we have this cultural shock, which we are living now. We have adjustment, which is kind of getting used to things. Then we have a stable state, which is a new normal. And then if you go back to your original country, you have reverse cultural shock, which is you kind of find your home country foreign to you. And then you have a resocialization. So how does this pan out for us? Well, I don't know about you, but I didn't have a honeymoon per se, but I did in the beginning, in the first weeks, I was kind of enthusiastic about the novelty. You know, well, I'm going to catch up in my reading. I'm going to declutter my closets. I'm going to do this and do that, which of course, half I haven't done yet. But there was a sense of novelty to it. And then we had cultural shock, which means that we're going to go through an adjustment phase and we're going to inevitably get used to a new normal. And this has been talked a lot about this new normal. Then we will probably in the future, when this is all gone, we're going to sometimes miss certain things, like I'm going to miss my afternoon walks with my daughter after lunch. You know, when we go back to our lives of being a bit more busier and stuff, it's very likely that we're going to miss certain things of this phase. So it's important to know how these processes in the transition go so we can be prepared for these phases. Now, let's go to hidden key number 2. Circles of influence. And this is a concept of Stephen Covey in the book from 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And what he says is that there are things that you control. There are things that you influence. You can't control them, but you can influence them. And there are things that are outside of your influence and your control. So one example that I like to give is that, for example, imagine that the weather is horrible outside. It's very cold and I can't control the weather, right? But I can influence the temperature in my house if I have air conditioning, for example. And what I can control is the clothing I'm wearing. So how can you implement this key into your dealing with challenging times? Well, figure out what you can control. And you can control the news that you read, for example, the amount of time that you're looking at the news. You can control your breathing, and your breathing is super important to make you more present and dealing with stress and anxiety. You can control the conversations you're having, if you're having positive or negative conversations. What else can you control? And make a list of these things. And that is where you're going to focus your attention. Now, if you decide to focus your attention on the numbers of what's going on, or the stock market, or the exchange rate, I'm sorry to tell you, you're in for a hard time because you can't control that. And it's important to focus your attention and your energy on what you can control, because that is going to make the difference in your daily life and your well-being. The things that you can influence, for example, you can influence how other people react to you. If you talk to someone with a smile, it is likely that they're going to respond with a smile. But you can't control that. I mean, imagine they had a fight with their spouse. You can smile all you want. You're not gonna, they're probably gonna be in a bad mood. So it's important to know the difference and focus your attention and your energy on the things you can control. Now, use your chat box and tell me if that makes sense to you. If this idea of circles of control makes sense to you. Excellent. So it makes sense to Sharon. And this is important because sometimes we need to be reminded about this, right? We kind of lose track of these things and we kind of know it intuitively, but it's important to have this information. The key is to find the balance. Exactly. I mean, if you figure out, for me, for example, watching the news, I was watching way too much news and it got to me, and I can't control that, but I can control how much time I expose myself to the news. So I stopped and I only watch the news once in the morning and in the afternoon. And I don't do that, for example, before I go to bed, because it's going to influence my sleep. So these are small shifts in your life that can make a huge difference. Now, let's go to, now this is, before we go to key number 3, this is something that I really find interesting. It kind of sums up the circles of control. It's a prayer that asks for serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, courage to change the things that I can, and wisdom to know the difference. So that pretty much sums up the things that, I can't change the things that I can't control, and I have to accept them. And I can change the things I control, so the courage to do that. So this is something that I wanted to share with you guys, because I think it's really helpful in these times. Now, the hidden key number 3. The hidden key number 3 is, before we go that, please write in the chat box the difference between change and transition. Is it the same thing for you? Is it different? What is the difference between these two, if you feel there is a difference? So let's see your answers. Transition is the way to change, I think. Okay. Who else has ideas? Thank you for sharing. So let's see who else, if there's more people. Not yet. But basically what we find is that the change is the moment and the transition is a process. So for example, we have another answer here. Things are changing all the time. Transition is undergoing change. That's one way to see it. So the idea here, and this is something that has been, was in William Bridges' book, Managing Transitions, which I highly recommend you to read if you have a chance. And what he says is that a change is a moment, okay? When you, for example, when you change jobs, you quit one job and you start another one. That's a change. That's a photograph. That's a moment in time. For example, when you move to a new country, you change the country. But the fact that you changed to a new country, that you moved to a new country, doesn't mean that you've had a transition to this new country. So you can move to a new country, but not be completely transitioned into this new culture. There is, in fact, according to William Bridges, And one thing that is very interesting is that and this is part of the hidden key I want to share with you, is that a transition, so this process of incorporating change starts with the ending. So the first part of a transition is related to the ending of something. So you end a relationship, you end a job, you end living in a new country. We ended a phase of what we called normal, right? Going out, interacting. That was the ending. And there is a time that is before a new beginning called a neutral zone. So according to him, this neutral zone is a kind of limbo, is a kind of time where it's kind of nothing happens. So for example, if you are living in a country, you move to a different country, there is a time where you're still not part of this new country, but you're not living in an old country anymore. So this period of nothingness, it's a kind of a void that people tend to overlook because it can be uncomfortable, it's uncertain. But this is kind of what we're living right now, right? We're in this phase where something has ended, our life, the way we knew it has ended, and we don't know what's going to go, how our lives are going to be in the future. So we're kind of in this neutral zone. And this actually is a great time to look and understand and recreate your reality with what? With what you control. Now, what can you do during this neutral phase? You can identify things that deplete your energy. So what in the previous phase was something that you didn't like, was not productive, was not good. It can be people, habits, food, thoughts, objects. For example, for me, in the past phase we lived in, overbooking myself and not giving myself time to rest was something that depleted my energy. You can recognize what gives you joy and energy. So in that phase, what was something that gave me joy and energy? Well, being productive and having, meetings. And okay, so Marie has to leave the meeting. The internet is acting up. No problem. It was great to have you, Marie. So now I'm going to propose an exercise. And since there are not too many of us, we can open our microphones and do this. If you want to talk and not use the chat box, that's fine. So I'm going to propose your exercise, and get your pen and paper that you have handy. And the first step of this exercise is to think of 3 things that deplete your energy. And then think of 3 things that bring you energy and joy, and write these down.
All right.
So once you have that done, these 2 steps, let me know, either through the chat box or say something. Or you can show up on your video if you want to. So are you done with your lists?
Not really.
Just 3 things.
Not that easy. Deplete your energy.
So how about Sharon and Fatima? How are they going with their list?
Almost done.
Good. So once you're done, let me know.
I know what gives me energy and joy. I'm not too sure about what depletes my energy.
It can be anything. It can be foods. It can be people, certain people that are, you know, negative. It can be certain habits. It can be anything.
Yeah. You mean in this situation, in this particular situation, or in general?
In general in your life.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I've got two of each.
Excellent. So once you're done, I hope Fatima and Sharon are done. Then the last step is choose one thing to eliminate and one thing to incorporate or keep in your new phase. So moving forward to our new normal, which we've been listening a lot about, choose one thing, and you don't have to do this now. You can do it calmly, but just choose one from each list and think about what moving forward you want to keep or incorporate and something you want to eliminate, and commit yourself to that. And finally, settle how you're going to celebrate these accomplishments, you know, because changing habits is many times not easy. So it's important to celebrate. It's really important to give yourself a pat on the back when you do something well and you deliver what you promised yourself. So this was a little exercise just so you can get your, you know, thinking caps about this new phase going. And you can use this tool anytime you want. Yeah. So I'm mindful of your time. Okay. And I have a bonus key for you. I promised 3 keys, so now I have a bonus key before we finish. And that is start a gratitude journal if you don't have one already. So gratitude is, there are many scientific studies that show the association of gratitude and decrease in well-being. Gratitude is a feeling, is an energy that gives us peace and calms us down. So this is one thing that my clients, I tell them to do in every single encounter we have in our group coaching. Every night before you go to sleep, write down 3 things that you are grateful for in that day. Be as specific as possible. But if there are days that you're grateful for a roof over your head and having running water and food in the fridge, that's okay. You know why? Because some days are damn hard. And there are things that even, you know, like, you don't have to be grateful for big things. It can be small things. But sometimes we forget about these small, supposedly small things that make our life easier and make our environment better. You can use a notebook, you can use an app on your phone, you can even create a gratitude jar. Some people have a jar and put in papers, and after a while they open up. It's important also to read what you've written after 2 or 3 weeks or 4 weeks. It's really good to look back at what you've written. And do what feels right and what you can do consistently. So the key to this is to be consistent about it. So in just one word, I would like to ask you, how are you feeling now after we've talked about these 3 or 4 keys? You can use the chat box or the microphone, whatever is best for you. Calm, excellent. Sharon says she's calm. That's good. Calm is good. Fatima, would you like to share? Arnold? Still busy. Focus on what you can control, Fatima. Think about that.
I don't know if this is a word. Enlightened. Enlightened?
Enlightened? Yeah, great. Excellent. That means you've seen the light.
Yeah.
So just, now is the time for Q&A. And I'm open for, any questions, any concepts that were clear that you'd like to clarify.
Yeah, I mean, I found the circles of influence. I found that really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Really. I mean, I know, yeah, the thing that really make the difference between what you can control, what you can influence, and what you don't have any control about, and you shouldn't worry too much,
Yeah.
And I've done like you. I've watched less and less news because you never, there's so much things said about everything, and you get a bit, really confused about everything.
Yeah.
So of course you need to know, but
That's true, and you can control that. One thing I was just finishing up a group coaching program, and we were caught in the middle of this pandemic. So it was interesting to see how, the themes of expats were evolved and changed with this current situation. And one thing that was very important was that two tips that I gave people is, the first one is, when you watch the news, put on a timer on your phone. Right. Because it's very easy to get caught in the rabbit hole of, especially if you're online, right? You see one thing and the other, and you click and you click and you da, da, da. So after you might lose track of time. So one tip is to, establish a time limit, whatever you want, whatever makes sense to you, but put a timer on your phone or whatever. And when that goes off, not next time, turn it off for now and look at it for next time. I think that's helpful because it's something external that makes us stop. So what are your questions? Fatima, Sharon, what are your questions, comments?
But there is also, I lived in London, in England for many years, and you get used to how people are, in general, and then you come to another culture, and Portugal being more the southern, way of living, and I found it, and still now after 20 years in Portugal, I find things that really difficult for me to adjust, because people are different, like if you go on a public transport, for instance, in England, if you push somebody, the person says sorry, they tells you 10 times sorry. Here it's completely different,
Yeah.
And those are the kind of things, even now, still difficult to adjust.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. You get used to things, and it becomes a new normal, right? For the good and for the bad.
Yeah.
I remember that, for example, in Brazil, it's quite common for older people and pregnant women to have priority in lines.
Right.
And for example, from friends of mine who told me that in the UK or in London, there was this movement where pregnant women had to have a badge on their clothing, like the belly was not enough. So someone would give them a seat on the public transportation. And I found that outrageous. It's like, oh my God, if there's a pregnant woman or an older person, you just stand up. There's but that's not normal for everyone. And so, and that's one of the things that we use our frame of reference when we're dealing with different cultures.
Yeah.
And that's normal and that's how it is, but you have to be aware that you're using your frame of reference.
Yeah.
Because your frame of reference is probably not other people's frame of reference. And good and bad are our judgments of things, right?
Yeah.
So, and people will say, you know what? Pregnancy is not a disease. And they're right, it's not a disease. It's just different ways of looking at things. So, and in order to navigate in new situations and new cultures, we have to remind ourselves of that, you know? And it's not to say that you agree or disagree, but it's easier to detach yourself from the situation and not take it so personally when you have that in frame of mind. Yeah, Fatima?
Sorry, but I think it's good manners, and I think it's all over the world. So when we are well educated, or we have a sense of citizenship, we know that if we see a pregnant woman in any country, we give him a place, a seat on the bus, or on the queue, and everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's not religious. It's not country aside. So I think it's a way of
well, you know, for pregnant women here in Portugal, here in Portugal, it only became a rule 6 years ago for pregnant women to have priority in lines. Right. So yes, what for you is common sense, for other people might not be, you know. And for example, in some cultures, to belch after a meal is considered very rude. Yeah, and in other cultures, it's considered extremely good because it means that you like
it's a compliment.
Yes. Exactly. So
it's a compliment.
Our values and we're of course we're allowed to have our values, but when we're dealing with different cultures, it's important for us to understand that what we think is right might not be what the quote unquote culture thinks is right. Yes. And if that were true for everyone, we wouldn't have to have laws, for example, for priority, because if it would be common sense and people would do that normally. So
it's like we saw now in Portugal. So we are seeing the masks everywhere. We are seeing the distance.
Yeah.
Except the beaches, because the beach will be a completely mess, because now Portugal has implemented 32 pages of what not to do on the beach. It's nonsense. Sorry, it's a bullshit. Wow. Sorry, it's really not practical. It won't be practical. Yeah. But everyone is aware of other person. Everyone is on the line. Everyone expects and behave. That's good.
Yeah.
It's a very and it's a way of putting the COVID out of our minds all the time. Mm-hmm. And I saw an interview on YouTube. I don't know if you saw it, for an autopsy of it was a pandemiologist that said it's all against everything that has been done with COVID. And they said, no, we don't need restrictions like that. We don't need emergency. We don't need nothing like that, because this is a flu. Mm-hmm. And he said, not too much, but it's the common sense, and OMS perhaps go beyond with the alarm part of the COVID. Let's see how it goes. Yeah. But now I think everyone is behaving except Brazil. Sorry, because Brazil is another way of thinking. Mm-hmm. Let's see what happens. Yeah. Yes, but I think in Europe and the other countries we are doing. Yeah. We are living.
Yeah. It's funny that you bring up the mask issue, because in Japan and Korea and some other countries, people wore masks normally when they had the flu. It was completely normal. Whereas in our culture, and I'm putting our culture, the Portuguese culture, because I'm also Portuguese, is that we would even when we have like a bit of like a cold, we would still kiss people, right? We still
but we have
give two kisses on the
another
cheek.
thing.
Yeah.
In Japan, they have a bad climate and a very bad climate issues, because the dust and everything was very polluted. They were obligated to use the masks also. And now with COVID, fortunately, it stopped a little bit, but they are aware of that.
Yeah.
Because it's like I said in Italy, the COVID went with the force with near Milan because of the climate and the mountain, because it was the bad weather there and climate. I think the issues of the respiratory issues.
Yeah, well, this is something. Yeah, this is so new that it's the kind of thing of we can't control it, we can't influence it, right? And we're trying to understand it. So it's important to focus on what we can control. So I really want to be mindful of your time. Thank you for being here. And this is my contact information. You can, I have a YouTube channel also with videos about cultural transition, and you're more than welcome to go there and take a look. And my Facebook page, I have also webinars and workshops where I work more specifically, usually with the cultural issue. Okay. But since this whole pandemic came up, I said, like, I want to make a parallel between, and when I saw the definition of cultural shock, I was like, wow. Wow, we're living cultural shock, right? So like, I thought that was very interesting. So well, thank you so much. Fatima.
Thank you very much, Deborah. I'm sorry there were not many people, but I think it's maybe the time, because we already do the webinar in the morning. I think Fatima is the first time we did in the afternoon. I was really expecting more people. Because
we can, if you want, we can do it again in the morning some other dates, because we had one day scheduled, and we have to change, and then for today I could only make it in the afternoon. But we can, if you found this valuable, we could do it.
Well, I will definitely, if you can send me your presentation, Deborah, I will share it on the website, and I will put the webinar now on our YouTube channel anyway.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, sorry, there were not more people, so.
Oh, that's okay. That's, I mean,
the best were here.
Yeah, of course. So so thank you, and if you think this will help people,
send me your presentation and I'll share.
Sure, absolutely. Okay, bye-bye. Have a great one.
All right. Thank you. Bye, Fatima. Bye-bye. Bye.